Good evening, councillors, also to our staff members as well, and to the public joining our Wodonga Council meeting for Wednesday the 20th of September as we stream virtually. A very warm welcome to those of you joining us online and to everybody within the room at the moment. We are on a digital stream of our meeting, and also a digital, we're conducting our meeting digitally as well. So obviously a little different to previous months. So I'd just like to outline a couple of things just from the get-go. I'll do a roll call in a moment to make sure that all councillors present can hear me, but also can see me and I can see them, and vice versa. So that'll be good. And just a reminder, councillors, if there are any technical problems, just the CEO is your point of contact, and we will adjourn for 5 minutes to be able to get you back into the room. But then outside of that, we may need to move on, obviously, as long as we're keeping our quorum. So, councillors, I'll get to apologies in a moment, but just before I do the roll call, Councillor Simpfendorfer is a late apology for this evening's meeting. So therefore, I'll do the roll call as you present on my screen. So, Councillor Bennett, you can see me okay. If you take yourself off mute, please, that'd be great. Just say hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watson, you're next in line. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and go the D's.
Councillor Hall.
Hello, everyone.
A good one. Got you loud and clear, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty.
Hello, good evening.
Thank you. You can hear me loud and clear. And just Councillor Mildren at the moment isn't on my screen, but I'm sure, Councillor Mildren, if your camera's on and you take yourself off mute, you'll probably prioritise over top of somebody that isn't. So if I can just check Councillor Mildren's there.
Good evening.
Ah, brilliant. There you go. You've just replaced our Deputy CEO, Deb Mudra. Welcome to the hot seat on my screen. As I mentioned, Councillor Simpfendorfer is an apology. Just a reminder too, councillors, obviously, if you move a motion this evening, we're just a little bit loose on times last month. I have kept a promise to you for multiple months now that I'd like to hear you all out with your points of view, but just please be respectful of others. 5 minutes if moving, 3 minutes if speaking, and also set 2 minutes in your right of reply and closing. Thank you very much. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to those from other communities who are here with us today, for they hold the memories, the tradition and the culture of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. As I mentioned, I did have a very late leave request from Councillor Simpfendorfer, so that is noted in the minutes now. Thank you, councillors. Are there any other requests for leave upcoming? No, thank you. I see shakes of heads. Item 4, declarations under acts, regulations, codes or local laws. CEO, do we have any declarations?
Mr Mayor, there are none. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5, declaration of conflict of interest. Councillors, conflicts of interest. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Yep, I've just got 2. So for the community impact grant, the community impact partnership program.
So item 8.4 and 8.5. Thank you. Councillor Mildren, you did contact me. You'd like to chime in at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I seek leave to make a personal statement at the commencement and prior to debate for item 12.2, the petition.
I'll make a note of that now. Councillor Mildren, did you want to elaborate while we're here?
It's in reference to conflict of interest issues.
Yeah, okay. Of days gone by.
Correct.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Please pull me up if I happen to move past that, but I'm just making a note in mind now for you to do that, and that will be fine.
Thank you.
All right. Item 6, councillors, is the confirmation of minutes of the previous meetings. Meeting on the 20th of August. Do I have a mover to confirm they are correct? Thanks, Councillor Bennett. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Sorry, councillors, I did forget to say I'll look for the visual cues on your screens. Thank you. Did anyone wish to speak against? No, therefore the minutes are confirmed. Item 7 are delegates' reports, of which there are none. Councillors, we're into item 8.1, the review of the instruments of delegation. There is a officer recommendation on page 8. Would somebody, thank you, Councillor Quilty. Are you moving as per the recommendation? No, Councillor Quilty, you've got a motion? Okay.
I'm sorry, I keep, my mouse is a bit slow, so I just keep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move an alternative motion on item 8.1, instrument of delegation.
Yeah.
I move that review of the instrument of delegation be postponed until December 2021 council meeting, that a planning and strategy committee of all council be established, that Maddox lawyers be instructed to prepare a specific and comprehensive instrument of delegation for the planning and strategy committee of all council, and that Maddox lawyers meet with the members of planning and strategy committee prior to bringing the new instrument of delegation to council for adoption in order to review the instrument of delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Miltron. Councillor Quilty, would you like to speak to that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, councillors, officers, and the ratepayers of the city of Wodonga, you all know too well the recent events surrounding the revision of the Junction Square master plan have raised questions in the community as to what issues are required to come to council for determination. What happens when public interest in an issue which can legally be dealt with under delegation is high? How high is high? Who determines that an issue is of great public interest, strategic significance, or carries potential reputational risk? What is the role and responsibility of the elected councillors in representing their community? I believe it is not appropriate to address the above questions by giving out personal assurances on Facebook. I believe in democracy, and democracy is not about personalities. It is about solid structures of checks and balances. I believe that today, when we are reviewing our instrument of delegation, it is our chance to establish those structures. This is why I propose that we establish a strategy and planning committee of all council, which will meet regularly and decide openly and publicly by way of democratic vote all strategy and planning matters in our city. Councillors, I call upon you to support my motion in order to give our community the transparency and the confidence in their elected representatives, which is both needed and deserved. The last but not the least, I do not see the need for us to adopt item 6 of the recommendations, which gives the CEO the power to make council decisions when a quorum can be reached due to COVID-19. Local Government Act 2020 provides for councillors to be able to attend council meetings virtually during the specified period. We are nearing the end of the second year of COVID-19 restrictions, and we haven't had a situation when the quorum could not be reached due to those restrictions. If quorum cannot be reached, there is a serious structural problem to deal with, and it won't be fixed by delegating even more powers to the Chief Executive Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Miltron.
Reserve, please, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miltron. Councillors. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to probably hear more through the debate, but I foreshadow a motion if this should not get up.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Hall, I think I saw your hand pop up in there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. With the existing document that's in our report tonight, I cannot, in good faith, to our communities put that document. With the continuing questioning of our community on decisions made, often under delegated authority, that have come up and have created angst within our community, is to which they believe or to believe should come back to council and be raised, discussed and decided on. When they are done under delegation, that makes us look like we're trying to unload our obligations as councillors. And we've had a lot of criticism out there in social media, and I think we should take that on board. I have had many people ask me, who is actually in control here? Why is it not our elected community representatives at the council? People ask why we have delegated this authority off, and I have been asking this same question for a long, long time. Decisions that come up before council are dealt with in the most open and transparent way. Our community gets to see what has actually been decided on and who is accountable for those decisions made. Yes, we do. I do know the old argument that it makes for a faster, streamlined processes for councillors to delegate it off, many of the delegations off, but and it can tie things up if councillors perhaps come back for councillors to decide on. But I don't believe this is necessarily the case, and I agree that there are many things council can do if we need to combat this. What old Councillor Courtney has said is exactly right. We could implement committees of the whole council, at least for planning strategies and for finances, and all with delegated authority. Councillors need to do their job, not delegate everything off that we possibly can to the CEO and staff. Many councils, if not a majority of councils, have committees of the whole council. And I don't understand why our council wants to delegate so much off. In delegating off our responsibilities, we are actually, I believe, taking away the community's voice at council. I believe transparency and accountability of the council is lost if we don't take a better look at how we do things at council. We are good, and what's good are community consultations if councillors have no power to act. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Bennett, you're the only one to speak yet. Did you wish to speak to this one?
Yeah, some questions. So with the Councillor Gulti, with the committee, setting up a committee, how is that any different to what's happening right here, right now?
I'm sorry about the delay. At the moment, we have briefings which are not recorded, which are not allowing the debate, which are not allowing the publicity and the transparency. We do not have any instrument of determining which issues which formally fall under the delegation based on the amount of money, or the existing instrument of delegation could be of significant public interest, could have strategic implications, other than the personal assurances of the delegates that surely if they see something that is raising public interest, they would bring it to council. I have no reasons not to trust in personal assurances. I just believe that we should not rely on personal assurances. We should have a committee, a working committee, which would have meetings, which would have its own instruments, its own charter, and we will be able to broadcast the meetings to the public and have debates on a lot more strategic and planning issues than we are having now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Another question, Councillor Bennett?
No, sorry, I still don't understand how that's different to what's happening right now with the item.
Councillor Mildren, are you happy to answer that question? Is that why the hand's up?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Fundamentally, we don't have any formal structures in place right at the minute to deal with issues and matters of strategic importance. And I propose to go into a bit more detail of this when I respond in my comments to make. But fundamentally, we do not have anything in place at the moment. The structures we have in place for briefings are not official meetings where any decisions can be made. We can't deal with issues in an incremental way and produce an outcome to give direction, a strategic direction to staff. We can't get involved in incremental processes of policy development right at the beginning. Policy and or strategy development right at the beginning. It's all very well for officers to come to us and say, we've prepared this document, say yes or no. in some instances, we need to be able to deal with those things from the grassroots point and get the strategic direction of those things set in train early. At the moment, we don't have any formal structures in place to do that. If we put a fully, properly delegated committee in place with the right delegations and the right mix of delegations, then that is something that's materially different to where we are today. And it gives the council an ability to deal with taking control of the strategy and policy matters. We certainly don't want to go down the path of taking over procedural stuff.
Councillor Milton, just for a moment there, because I know you were trying to answer Councillor Bennett's question of Councillor Quilty. Did you want to make that your closing comments and your reserved right to speak?
I've got lots more to add to that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, you've got the 3 minutes.
Has Councillor Bennett concluded?
Yep, thumbs up from Councillor Bennett. You got 3 minutes, Councillor Mildred.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought it might be a long-winded answer if I didn't pull you up.
Yeah, well, it would have been. In essence, the pendulum has gone way too far at Wodonga Council in regard to delegations at the present time. And I think the outcry from the community in the last little while has brought that home in a fairly clear and concise way. We, as councillors, I believe, have abrogated responsibility on far too many things. We've been, perhaps it's because of fear, perhaps it's because of other reasons, but we've pushed things across to officers that shouldn't have been pushed across. We've not got the right structures in place that I was alluding to before. And as Councillor Hall mentioned, perhaps in addition to strategy and planning, we probably need a finance of some description committee as well, which is common at many, many other councils across Victoria. Even our neighbours have finance committees. We need to look at doing things where there's a balance, where the balance is correct, and we bring the pendulum back between those things that are genuinely procedural and operational. We don't want to be making decisions about who should get public notice for a planning application, for example. That is clearly a procedural matter, and we shouldn't be taking that out of the delegation. But what we should be doing is consciously and in a professional manner, as councillors, elected councillors, sit down and go through this stuff and decide what is policy and should remain with council and be dealt with through the committees, and what is procedural and should be correctly delegated to the staff. So there's probably lots and lots more I could add into all that equation, but for the time being, I'll leave it at that and suggest that what Councillor Quilty is recommending or has moved is a reasonably good motion to get this process set in the right direction. There's clearly going to be opportunities to tighten it and tweak it and do whatever else we need to do as we go through the steps that are outlined in the motion. So I think this is a really good start for us to get the balance back into council and get some credibility back with our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildred. In closing, sorry, I see Councillor Bennett raising a hand. I'm assuming another question, Councillor Bennett?
Yep.
Yep.
Can I just ask with Councillor Mildred, you said that there's examples of items that have been pushed from councillors to officers. Can you just give me some examples of that? And I'm assuming that means something that's been delegated has been either intentionally or accidentally misused. Is that what you're alluding to? And can I get those examples of what has been pushed to officers?
Answer straight away.
Yes, sorry. Thanks, Councillor Mildred.
That's not what I was saying, actually. That's a bit different to the context of what I was saying. What we've done with delegation is we've transferred the responsibility, pushed might be the incorrect word, but we've transferred the responsibility of a very high number of things. For example, in essence, under the Local Government Act 2020, we've effectively transferred nigh on 100% of what's allowed to be delegated, we've delegated, which includes the preparation of some policy statements. I think perhaps if you want an example, the document that the CEO's approved in respect to virtual meetings is probably a good example. Now, whether or not that should be something that comes back to council or whether it's an operational document, that's the debate we should be having. My view is that that's a strategic document and should be the domain of the council. So if it's not, we're not looking at specifics. We're looking at the range of things that have been abrogated by the council laws to unelected officers, which that's what I'm saying. We've got the balance wrong. We've gone way too far with that balance. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Bennett, are you happy with answers provided?
Yep, fine.
Thank you, councillors. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? With the voting tie, I'll therefore exercise the Mayor's casting vote and I'll use that to defeat the motion. Councillors, I'll look for a motion on item 8.1. Councillor Watson, you had foreshadowed. What did you have?
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to put forward the current motion that's on the books. It's disappointing that such
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, there is no current motion.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. I'll uphold that one. Councillor Watson, can you please clarify, did you mean the recommendation reported?
I recommend the recommendation in the report as of tonight.
On page 8, so you're moving the motion as per the recommendation, Councillor
Yes,
Watson?
yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bennett, thank you. Councillor Watson, speak to your motion, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I appreciate the different motions coming forward, but I think running like this, we had opportunities last week at the briefing to even bring forward a second proposal where there's two councillors not at that meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mildren, state your point of order.
Mr. Mayor, we did not technically have opportunity to raise anything of the nature at a briefing because that would be inappropriate and it would be debating the issues and it would be putting pressure and so on officers to change the way they put reports up. That would be inappropriate, Mr. Mayor.
I'm more referring, Mr. Mildren, that Councillor Mildren, that's bringing new ideas and new suggestions to the table. We wouldn't be debating it. You would be bringing forward something that might alleviate what's going on tonight. So I just think, you know, having something without notice is not appropriate either.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren, in stating your point of order, just which section, rule, or paragraph?
Mr. Mayor, to do what Councillor Watson has claimed would be a breach of Section 124 of the Act for a start. We have no structure in place to do what he suggested to be done. And it's as simple as that. There is no structure to do what he's asking councillors to do. Secondly, we'd be in breach of the Act again by raising matters for debate or discussion, which preempt what you might be putting up to a council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. The point of order, I would have to say, doesn't hold. I think Councillor Watson's just a little bit lost with his terminology that he's using. So, Councillor Watson, have you finished speaking to your mover, as mover?
Yes, yeah, Councillor.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett, you a seconder?
Yep. So we set these delegations to ensure that the organisation can run smoothly and that so councillors can focus on strategy and not the day-to-day decisions of the council. This document has been thoroughly checked over by Maddox and we have had opportunity to have a look at this before and have discussion before this. Previously, this document's been a guideline, so now it's a policy, so that does tighten it up a little bit, which is good. And I still think if there are particular examples where we know a delegation isn't working, bring that delegation to the table and let's discuss that delegation. If there's something accidentally or not accidentally, happened, if something's been misused, let's have that conversation about what exactly has happened, and maybe we do need to transfer it back. I'd be absolutely keen to have that conversation. But at the moment, so actually a question maybe to the CEO, or maybe, I don't know if this is to Officer Scully. Could you talk a bit about these delegations in terms of, I don't know, you might not know this answer, this is a similar delegations to other councils have as well?
CEO?
Yeah, look,
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have to leave the room for a moment. Somebody's just about to turn the alarm on in the building I'm in.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. We still have a quorum, and I think Councillor Mildren should be able to hear still. CEO, your response?
Yeah, no, look, thank you. Obviously, these delegations have been worked up by MADEX. So MADEX represent the majority of councils across Victoria. So these are fairly standard. They haven't changed significantly from when they last came to council. Certainly when our new councillors were inducted, in fact, new and existing councillors were inducted, we brought the senior partner of MADEX up to talk through those delegations and have a discussion about them. But from our perspective, I support what Councillor Bennett says in terms of not really seeing any evidence of those delegations being misused. And there was some reference to the current community angst, which we all acknowledge and accept in relation to what's going on in Development Victoria's site on Junction Place, but no exercise of delegation has occurred with regards to any of that at this stage. So I personally, the delegations allow us to run an efficient and effective business, and it is an important business. I don't see any reason for them to change, but I'd certainly like to discuss those areas where councillors think council officers have poorly exercised a delegation to the detriment of the community. I don't believe that to be the case. Thanks.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Bennett, you finished speaking as a seconder. Thank you. Councillors? No. Councillor Watson in closing?
Put forward the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? Thank you. We have a 3-apiece tie once again. I'll therefore exercise the right of the casting vote of the chair of the meeting as the mayor, and I'll vote to carry the motion on 8.1 as per the recommendation. On to item 8.2, councillors. We have the proposed sale of 121 Whytes Road, Bandiana. I do note, just before we go there, thanks, Councillor Hall, I will come to you in a moment for the motion, but this is an item that will come up obviously a little bit later on in camera as well in relation to this transaction. But what we need right now is a motion. There is a recommendation on page 129, which is page 20 of the public agenda. Councillor Hall, you got in nice and quick. I'm assuming you're happy to move as per the recommendation, or do you have something else there?
No, I'd like to move a motion.
Yep.
It's not unsimilar, but I'll read it out. I've got a copy I can send to Kevin Scully if councillors if need be. But okay, so the motion I'd like to move is that, 1, having considered the submission and following all the required statutory procedures pursuant to section 189 and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, that the council resolved to sell the whole of the land contained in certificate and title volume 12243, folio 928, known as Lot 1, located at 121 Whytes Road, Bandiana, Victoria, Lot 1. 2, the sale be in accordance with the terms as described in the public notice on Saturday, the 3rd of July, 2021, with the addition of a satisfactory proposal of the use and development of the land. 3, in light of the submissions received and land known as Lot 1, be sold by auction in the form of a EPI, inclusive of price, use and development of the land. That's my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Hall's motion? Councillor Quilty. Councillor Hall, would you like to speak to your motion?
Okay, look, having the past dealt with some of the issues regarding land already in that estate. Anyway, I noted in the officer's report there were submissions received by council on the sale proposal of this council land. Many had concerns over what would be developed on this land due to issues around land in this estate that has been had in the past. This industrial land is near a large residential estate. Any usage or development could have real impacts on the surrounding neighbourhood. We need to be mindful of this, and that is why I've put this motion up to council to consider tonight. It takes into account the submitter's concerns when dealing with a possible sale of the property. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty as seconder. Your turn to speak.
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, I will leave my microphone unmuted, and please let me know if it becomes disruptive, because I have a problem controlling my mouse at the moment, and I reserve the right.
Thank you. Reserve the right. Councillors. Councillor Bennett, I think, got in there first. Sorry, Councillor Mills, you might have been just out of your camera shot, so I think Councillor Bennett was clear first. Thanks, Councillor Bennett.
Thanks. Can I just ask, so I've got the officer's recommendation in front of me. Councillor Hall, could you just talk me through the differences between your one and what the officer's recommendation is? Just so I really understand both, you know, what's on the table.
Councillor Hall, you're on mute. I'm not too sure if you're speaking to us or if you're trying to get yourself sorted out there. Sorry, I thought I'd pull you up.
Oh, no, I'm just, here we go. Okay, the difference is I have, if you look at the recommendations, rather than it go to an auction as per se, and then if it gets passed through, it go to private treaty. This will be an expressions of interest, and would come back to council with a price proposal and with the following information that land use of the development of the land. So it would come back to council for us to assess going forward, basically. It leaves out the auction part, public auction, where if, you know, the public auction goes to auction, the highest bidder usually wins. If we don't get a bid, it would go to a private treaty. It says, so I've left out A because 3A doesn't correspond to my EPI. So basically, it's pretty self-explanatory, really.
And Councillor Hall, just for clarification, EPI, do you mean EOI as an expression of interest?
Expression of interest. Sorry, yeah, I'm reading. I've got that wrong. Sorry, yeah.
No, you're right. All good. I can't read my own handwriting either. Councillor Bennett, did you need to speak any further, or was that just a question for you, Councillor Bennett? Was there anything more on this motion?
No, thanks for that clarity. Can I just get, I'm not sure, I can't remember, I haven't got whoever wrote this report, I'm not sure if that was Officer Mudra. I haven't gone down to, if I can get some commentary on the differences between what the officers have put in terms of the public auction and Councillor Hall's proposal.
Thanks, CEO.
Yeah, look, this paper has already been before council, obviously, on at the June meeting, and then it's gone out for public comment, so public consultation. So were we to change the resolution as suggested by Councillor Hall, it would need to go back out to the community for comment. When it was out there for 4 weeks, it had no objections at all. But I guess the reason for proceeding with an auction, noting that this is a fairly small parcel of land, was that in the current marketplace, council officers felt that the there was a strong market and that the auction would realise the greatest benefit financially for council. Obviously, it's industrially zoned, and the usual controls would be put in place to make sure that appropriate development occurred on that land. I will just see if Councillor Schultz or whether Officer Schultz or Officer Mudra would like to just add anything else. Thank you.
Thanks, Officer Schultz.
I'm not sure. Yes, there I am. No, I have nothing further to add. Just to reinforce, the land is zoned as industrial land, and any applications for development will have to meet the zoning requirements for that parcel.
Thank you, Officer Schultz. Thank you, CEO. Councillors. Councillor Watson or Councillor Mildren? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I just heard the CEO say that there was no submissions. I thought there were submissions that raised a whole range of questions. Is that correct? I was of the understanding that there were many submissions, and I had the feeling that, or I had the belief that the motion was moved in the changed manner it was as a direct response to the community's submissions. And I think that's perfectly acceptable for council to modify a situation when the community has been consulted. I have other things to say, Mr. Mayor, but perhaps that should be dealt with first.
Yeah, you want some clarification? Thank you. The CEO did raise his hand pretty quick in your piece there, Councillor Mildren. Thanks, CEO.
Yes, look, I stand corrected, and it is in the paper for everybody to read, but there was one formal submission raised and some informal commentary as well, and that has been addressed in the paper. You know, obviously that's there, and I'm sure the councillors have read that. So I stand corrected. There was one formal submission. Thank you. My apologies.
Thank you, CEO. Deputy CEO, Deb Mudra.
Thank you. I am of the understanding that if you change it from a public auction to an expression of interest, then we will need to go back out again with a public notice, notifying the public that we have an intention to sell it, but it will be under a different set of circumstances that we sell. So we start the process all over again. So it'll go out again, but it'll be an EOI process. It will then come back to council after it's gone, after we've advertised that it's going out under an EOI and not under a public auction.
Thank you, Deputy CEO. Councillor Mildren, hopefully that clarified your questions, but you've right to speak. You're on mute. Sorry, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Mildren, you're still on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
You're
fundamentally, we go out to public consultation to get the views of the community. By various means, we've got the views of the community. I have actually had a few phone calls as well. I know they're not formally through the system, but that I presume those same people had contacted the council via other means. Maybe they haven't. But fundamentally, there's a view that some people are expressing that live in that general vicinity that they don't want to see an expansion of things, and they want to see council to take a greater deal of control as to what transpires on the land. Now, yep, absolutely correct. We do have the Planning and Environment Act and the permits and all that sort of stuff. That's one methodology. And we can deal with things under a very strict set of rules in terms of what the planning scheme says, and that's fine. But if we want to listen to what our community's been saying to us, and if we want to go down the path of trying to get the best possible outcome that we can get, both by selling the land for a good price and controlling what the land gets used for, such that it minimises potential adverse impact on our residential communities and other communities nearby, then we should be trying to do that. And by going through to a expression of interest process, as distinct from a straight up auction, it gives us the ability to evaluate proposals for use of the land as part of that sale process, which gives us another string to the bow to try and deal with the things that the community have come and told us during the consultation process. If that means going back out to another public notice process, then so be it. That's responding to our community. And in recent times, we know we've been getting some pretty heavy criticism that we don't respond. Well, here's an opportunity to respond to what our community's been saying. And if it means going out to another 3 or 4 week notice process before we go to the sale, so be it. I think the motion that's been put is admirable in the way that it compromises between what we were seeking to do under the original proposition that was put out to notice and what we should be doing now, given the feedback we've got from the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. CEO, can I ask you a question? What does it cost us each time that we go out to public on? I'm happy for you to take this on notice, but I'm just wondering if we're doing this a second time rather than picking it up when it first comes to us as councillors, what sort of administration cost that is to be advertising that publicly and what have you. Do we have that answer at hand?
Oh, look, the costs of doing that are not significant. It's more a time factor. We've got to go. We brought this to council, and councillors resolved to sell it by auction previously. So it just loses. Well, we started in June, so it loses a couple of months, and obviously it's land that we're not using, and we want to make sure that it's sold to the highest bidder and used in accordance with the planning scheme.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Bennett, I saw your hand up in there. Sorry, I snuck in with a question of my own.
No, that's all right. Yeah, my other things are questions. But from what I can hear from this debate, there is a formal process in place, and that has happened. I don't want to be dealing with hearsay in the debate. We've got one submission, one formal submission. They've followed the correct processes. That's why they're there. The submission has been dealt with in the officer's recommendation. And from what I can gather as well, the main difference going back out to the community, we're asking them the same thing except auction EOI. How is that going to change what the community feel for that space? And the zoning is already dictated. So that's already in the planning scheme. I don't see what the point is going back to the community asking them the same question that they've already given us one formal feedback for. So I'm happy with the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson, the only one I haven't had to speak yet.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I probably just follow historically that it has always been zoned for a long, long time in light industrial zoning. And when the residential developments occurred, they were well aware of that issue there. So I would like to think that we put forward the original motion and follow procedures what we've been doing up till now. So I won't be voting for this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty, you reserved your right.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Hall for the interesting proposition. I, in my time on council, obviously haven't dealt with expressions of interest, but it sounds like an instrument that could solve some problems. With the problems that have been voiced both via formal submission and via other forms of responses. And also, I would like to thank my colleagues, councillors, for the debate. I respectfully reject the premise that we have one formal submission and the rest of it is hearsay. I believe that community voices take different forms. Some members of the community are more savvy than the others. Some members of the community are more used to picking up the phone and calling their elected representative. We are not here to express mistrust for our fellow councillors by saying that's hearsay and that's formal submission. I believe any concerns that have been brought to us to the public are valid.
Sorry, Councillor Bennett, you raised a hand there, sorry.
Yeah, well, to clarify what Councillor Quilty is saying in terms of a phone call is hearsay. We have had one formal submission. That's not up for debate. That's just a fact.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Quilty, continue.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Bennett. I would greatly appreciate if you allowed me to finish. I have allowed you to finish any comments and speeches that you have made so far. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Even if we are going through another community consultation process, I believe it is fine. We are here to serve our community. We made a decision to put out a proposition to community consultation. Community has made their opinion known. If we say auction has been decided on, and then whatever community has come up with only counts if it's in the form of formal submission. In my personal opinion, it makes community consultation a bit of a farce. Therefore, we're here to serve our community. We're paying the lawyers from the ratepayers' money. Therefore, I don't see it as a problem should the proposition by Councillor Hall be voted for. I don't see it as a problem to go for another community consultation. However, I would like to foreshadow, I believe that we need to vote on the motion of Councillor Hall first, but I would like to foreshadow that I was going to put up for a debate an amendment to the current recommendation. I don't know if, because of my lack of experience, I don't know whether it would have the same effect as to go for another community consultation, and whether it would address the concerns raised by the community. So I'm just foreshadowing that I would like to have this conversation once we have voted on Councillor Hall's proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Hall, in closing, before I put your motion.
I'd just like to say that there's been a huge ongoing concern over what is already existing there, and there's the concern of what could be developed there. I know we're saying if, but having it come back to, if we do an EOI and it comes back to council, we do have some control over what does get developed. And, you know, we should be taking our community's concerns on board. It's a massive residential area out there, and to ignore it, I just find it you know, it just, that's what we are, we're councillors. We need to be taking community, you know, issues on board, and to whatever happens out there going forward, I'm not going to be part of it if it turns out to be a dog's breakfast, put it that way.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillors, were there any questions any further? No, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? We've got a tie at 3 apiece, so I'll exercise the casting vote to defeat the motion. I know, Councillor Watson, you'd foreshadowed something, and so did Councillor Quilty after you, but Councillor Watson, what's yours?
Once again, Mr. Mayor, I'll just put the original motion that was which was on the books.
As per the recommendation.
As per the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, you're looking for. Thank you. Do I have a seconder as per the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson. Speak to. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. As the CEO pointed out, this isn't the first time it's been before us. This issue's been bubbling along for some time. And it also that the residential and light industrial, there's always going to be a border. There's always going to be an area where one starts and one finishes. So having that argument of that, there's no credibility there at all, because we do need to have a starting point and finishing point of both types of zoning in our city. And that the old sale yards and all the land around it being zoned for light industrial has always been there for well over 40, 50 years in zoning. So therefore, I think the motion before us should stand.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, I've already said what I need to say in terms of that the community consultation process has already happened. I don't think there'd be anything more gained by going back to that exact same community saying we're going to now do this by EOI. I do want to also say that I've heard some interesting things about community consultation, and you know, we've got these formal processes in place for a reason, and to then just throw that out and say, well, no, someone had a phone call, and yes, that's fine, of course, community can call us, but then to ignore the formal process that's happened, why have we got that in place then? Like, we have to be going on the information that all councillors have. We all had access to that one submission, so we can all make a informed decision on that. That's why we have the community consultation process, so we can all have the same information and make an informed decision. So I've got nothing more to add. I'm happy with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillors Mildren. Thank you, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find this interesting conversation about consultation. There's a whole lot of hypocrisy and other things going on here. There's levels of lack of understanding of processes. Fundamentally, what I'm hearing is that the process of consultation is we do a process, we go out and ask the community what they have to say, and then ignore what they have to say completely. That to me is what consultation's all about. We are absolutely making ourselves into a laughing stock tonight. This is just going too far. The same thing about the zoning, saying that, oh, well, the zoning's been there for 40 years and the boundaries always been there. But the processes that we can implement as council, as elected members representing our community, not unelected officials, but as elected members representing our community, we can actually do other things other than just applying the planning scheme. We can actually apply other methodologies to get outcomes on the fringe. Councillor Watson says, oh, the zone's a hard boundary and it's always going to be there. We have other mechanisms available to us from time to time that vary according to different circumstances, and we should be applying them based on their merit to give outcomes that match the community expectations as best we can. It's not always going to be perfect, and there is going to be times when we don't have options. But in this particular situation, we had options. We've thrown those options away in not listening to our community, and now we're going back to a rigid process, and the rigid process is step by step. Don't worry about what we've gone through it, and we've asked our community, but it doesn't matter what they've said. We'll just roll on. This is ridiculous, and I have had an absolute back teeth fill of it. I'm really over all this stuff. It's time we got our act together. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty, I think your hand went up in there. Is that right?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to suggest an amendment to the motion as per recommendation. I read the guidelines. I believe I can do it, suggest an amendment at any point in time.
So, Councillor Quilty, are you amending the recommendation in front of you? Obviously, if you're making a substantial change to it, it would be not allowed as such, but was it just some minor wording or something? Because we can check with the mover and the seconder.
All right. So the wording was as per the recommendation, but in point 3 in brackets. So we're on page 129. In point 3 in brackets where it says, but if the land is passed in at auction by private treaty, I was going to suggest to amend that to read, but if the land is passed in at auction, the matter be brought to council for further decision.
On the following terms.
So instead of by private treaty, the matter be brought to council for further decision. Should it be passed in?
Were you suggesting removing the following points then as well, Councillor Quilty?
That's a minimum purchase price of no less. The following points address the selling it at auction. I believe they don't need to be removed. Sorry, do you mean A and B?
So, Councillor Watson, I guess the intent of your motion as per the recommendation would be relatively still on course, although it would bring it back to council should it not sell at auction. I guess it's over to you as the mover as to whether you're happy to accept that.
I probably wouldn't accept that, Mr. Mayor, because I think if it did fail at auction, that it probably, through the CEO, would probably come back to us. Because if you're going to go to then private treaty, for what price? Because if it's failed at auction, it's probably due to the price.
CEO, you had your hand up there to add further to that.
I just want to advise that obviously even that small change suggested by Councillor Quilty does fundamentally change the recommendation of officers, and it would then go back out for another 4 weeks of community consultation. So even though that's a minor change, it's a change to what we put out to the community. So just remind people that council made a resolution that we sell this by auction, and if it doesn't reach the reserve by private treaty, that's what went out in the public notice. And we had, yes, one formal submission against that. And that's where we're at right now. Thank you.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Quilty, did you wish to speak to the motion as it stands?
I really have already said what I think about having had community consultation and then not addressing it. I don't see the need to repeat myself. I just have one question to clarify. Private treaty, does private treaty issue come back to council or does it stay with the CEO?
CEO?
So it's as per the resolution. You're resolving to sell by auction. If you don't sell at auction, by private treaty, and as long as that private treaty was above the reserve price, which will be discussed in confidential tonight, then it will proceed to sell.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Mildred, did I see your hand up in there somewhere?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification on what the CEO said. By inference, that means that whenever we get any public consultation that drives the need for a change to something that's been out for consultation or public notice, then we, by definition, have to go back through the notice process again. I think that's making a mockery and a nonsense of things. Can that get some clarification, please?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and we've clarified that with Maddox, and we'll come on to an issue at item 8.3 that specifically is a good example of that, where we had to revisit the whole process again because of a factual error put forward as a suggestion, but we'll come to that at that time. So yes, we've taken legal advice from Maddox, and I think that's very much the case. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Hall, I have you as the only one not speaking at this point in time to the motion. For or against? Did you have anything further to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, there was informal feedback received via the council's online channels, and quite often when the council are doing consultations and what have you, they accept online feedback in surveys, in our strategy documents, all sorts of stuff. So I can't understand why we can't accept that in this decision and take it on board and look to try and alleviate their concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. In closing, Councillor Watson?
Just please put the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett, sorry, I'm assuming parenting duties called there for 30 seconds. I could see you were still in the room. I'm putting the motion as per the recommendation. All in favour? All opposed? Once again, we have a tie. I'll therefore exercise the casting vote right to carry the motion for item 8.2 as per the recommendation. Councillors, on to item 8.3, 11B McFarland Road, Wodonga, or better known as the Willows. Now, as the CEO mentioned a moment ago, we have seen this come before us once before. There is a recommendation on page 156, page 27, of the public agenda. Just before I get a motion, CEO, I might just ask you about that if I can, because you've just realised, you've just reflected on the fact that we are seeing something come back before us now. Can you just explain the reason as to what's led to this circumstance?
Mr. Mayor, yes, when we first put this up to council, we sought obviously legal opinion and we put it up. And part of the recommendation included a 173 agreement, which is standard practice. There was a suggestion from a councillor that we should switch the 173 to and instead put a caveat on the title. That change was supported by councillors at the time, but was subsequently found to be an incorrect process by our lawyers and can't proceed. So we're bringing it back with its original position requiring a 173 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. CEO, Councillor Quilty, you're happy to move as per the recommendation?
I have a question, please.
Oh, yes, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's probably going to sound a bit silly, but I didn't pick it up when I was reviewing the minutes from our June meeting. I believe it was decided in June council meeting. However, when I looked through my own meeting notes, I discovered that we were talking not about caveat, that my notes say that we were talking about a covenant. I have limited legal knowledge, but I believe covenant is registering, how does Google say it? So provide control of use of the land, and caveat is, as per the report, expression of interest. Is that correct? And can anybody else from that meeting have any recollections of whether it was caveat versus covenant? And would it make any difference to the decision we're making tonight? Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, for taking that question from Councillor Quilty.
So the correct process is to, and this has been checked by our lawyers, the correct process is as we originally stated back in June. A covenant or a caveat is not the appropriate method. The appropriate method is a 173 agreement, and that's why it's come back to you. And that's taken that out of the legal advice that we get on all these types of sales. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Quilty, has that answered your question?
Just to clarify, please, did the lawyers consider both covenant and caveat?
I would have to take that specific. I would have to take that specific question on notice. But what the lawyers did say was that the appropriate legislative process for selling the land is a 173 agreement on it. So we will, I don't think any of us are lawyers. So generally, that's why we pay expensive lawyers to give us the best legal advice, and that's what we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Do I have somebody with a motion on this one? As per the recommendation, Councillor Bennett, or thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Watson. And Councillor Bennett.
No, all very clear in the report, and this is obviously the second time it's come up, and potentially an example of why, we shouldn't be making these decisions. I wasn't at this meeting, but obviously a decision was made on the fly without the correct legal input. So maybe an example of why we shouldn't be doing that. And if someone has an example of making an item better, to raise that before, so we can actually get the correct legal input into that before we make the decision. That's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
I reserve my right. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Watson. Reserving right. Councillors. Councillor Quilty.
I'm sorry, I have a question about the form rather than this substance. Councillor Bennett has just mentioned that this could be an example of why we should discuss this before and potentially ask the lawyers before the issue comes to the vote. I fail to see how we can do that without breaching the code of conduct, which prohibits us from instructing the staff. Am I missing something here? Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. I see your hand up.
Yes, there's absolutely nothing to stop a councillor at any time seeking clarification on a technicality to council officers, we can get that at any time, and we will normally receive that and welcome it, and we'll test it with our lawyers and everything else. So if we can do that before the meeting and before we make our final recommendation to councillors, then we're presenting that paper in the best possible light for a decision by councillors. It's better to do that once, and obviously our intention will be to listen to or at least consider any questions, address any points of clarification, particularly those technical legal ones, and fix those before the paper comes up to the council for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillors speaking for or against? No. Councillor Watson, reserved your right.
Mr Mayor, just put the motion after Councillor Bennett's had her close.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett, nothing further. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. All those opposed? So thank you, carried 5-1. Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Just make sure you're right in front of that camera for me. I just sort of didn't know what was going on there for a moment. 8.4, Councillor Bennett, I understand, if my memory is correct, you've got declarations for the next two items. Would you be able to state what the conflict is, please?
Yep. So for both those items, Gateway Health is also seeing or applying for one or two of them. So and I work there, so conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. We'll wait for you to be out of the room, and then we'll get you back in shortly once we've dealt with those two items. Thank you. Can I have confirmation that Councillor Bennett has been parked aside somewhere, please?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, councillors, item 8.4, recommendation on page 166, page 34 of the public agenda. This one's obviously the Community Impact Grant Program. There's some recommendations from the officers there following their panel process. Do I have somebody to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Is that as per the recommendation, Councillor Watson? Thank you. I got your visual cue there. Thanks, Councillor Watson. Do I have a seconder, councillors? Happy to have a seconder for a purpose of debate. Thank you, Councillor Hall. For the purpose of debate, Councillor Watson, thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Once these come around, I think quarterly or half yearly, and the process has been a little bit behind due to COVID and things like that. I note that I think there's only one application that was knocked backwards to Wodonga Hockey Club, and they are getting new rooms and they're getting quite a bit of expenditure there anyway. So with that aside, we have a very good process that filters out the whole process of each individual application, and therefore I put and thank the staff and thank the people on board who go through all that procedure and put forward the motion. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Hall, you were seconder. Did you want to speak now or reserve your right? I know it was as per debate. Happy to wait. Sorry, you're on mute at the moment. That's fine. Councillor Mildren or Councillor Quilty? Councillor Quilty, or both. I'll go Quilty first. Thanks, Councillor Mildren.
Oh, thank you. My apologies, Councillor Mildren. I will be very brief. Honestly, I have already voiced my opinion on the similar issues when we had previous lot of community grants. I would like to say once again that I love and admire our community, and I think we have lots of great worthy organizations in the community. However, I will be opposing 8.4, 8.5 and 8.6 on principle. My principle is I believe it is not the role of the council to collect money from ratepayers and then make the decisions where to allocate it to community organizations. I believe our kind, generous and responsible people are very well capable of making this decision for themselves. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm probably well known by now for my opinion in relation to using taxpayer money or ratepayers' money for transfer payments of any kind. I accept and I understand, and I do believe that many of these projects are admirable projects in our community. I think there's some good reason why these community projects should be supported, but I don't see good reason why we can allocate ratepayers' funds to most of these projects. I do support spending council money on council land for community groups that own council land. I think that's perfectly acceptable, and that's council spending our ratepayers' money on assets that belong to the council, and supporting the community at the same time. Having said all that, being pragmatic, even if this was to be overturned tonight by the vote tonight, I would expect it will be brought straight back again at another council meeting when the numbers might fall a different way, and it will be rolled through the system on different numbers. So from that point of view, I'm reticent to oppose the motion. As much as it pains me to say I don't believe in transfer funds, I just don't see the point of wasting our time bringing this back again at another date and doing it all over again with a different set of numbers. I'll think about it between now and when the vote happens. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, had you just reserved your right, I think. Yeah, go.
Yeah, look, I mean, in agreements with some of what's been said, there are some in here that I probably wouldn't support, and there's some that I do, because it's not broken down. I'm left with making a decision on the whole, so I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Watson, in closing.
Mr. Mayor, this is what I think community is all about, is that they're out there doing things within our community and building a great asset to our community, or supporting our residents and our greater people in the community. So these grants are well founded by a committee, and the best results have come forward. And this is what community is all about. If you read through the applications, it's building our structure, it's building a sense of being in our city of Wodonga. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I put the item as per the recommendation for 8.4. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. It is carried 3-2. On to item 8.5, the Community Impact Partnership Program. Again, recommendation on page 186 or page 39 of the public agenda. Very similar process to what we've just seen for item 8.4. Councillors, would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Watson, as per recommendation. Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder, even for the purpose of debate if needed? Councillor Hall, you happy to go for purpose of debate again? Yep, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, it's probably just repeating what I said in the previous motion or agenda item. There are a few items that have been rejected, so we don't just put everything through that comes through. It's got to go through its merit and be evaluated. So therefore, I'm very happy to put forward the motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Hall, thanks for being a good sport in seconding for debate, because I know you do love a debate. Do you want to reserve your right, or do you want to add it in now? Up to you. Reserve right, thank you. Councillor Quilty or Councillor Mildren?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Mildren?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These sort of grants I find even more difficult. They tend to be transfer of ratepayers' money to relatively small parts of the community, which I find it difficult to cope with, even though the community groups are very admirable and they do some great work within their own sections of the community. I find it difficult to transfer ratepayers' money to small community groups. or smaller community groups of this nature. It doesn't sit well with me. I think these groups need support, but I'm not sure that ratepayers' money should be used to do that support. We should be encouraging the community to contribute and to donate to these groups. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall.
Oh, look, this is a hard one for me. I see the merit in it, but this one I really don't believe council really should be paying for it, and that's how I look at it. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Watson, in closing.
Mr. Mayor, any small support and donations or council funds to go to these groups is really important. I can remember some years back that we would give the Wodonga Citizens Band some funds to help develop their music and program and things like that. So, we all get the benefit from this at some stage in our lives in our city, and it's a small price to pay to bring a bit of development for our community. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? Motion's defeated. Thank you very much. On to item 8.6. We'll get Councillor Bennett back in the room, please. I feel like we need some on-hold music. Would you like to sing a song, Olga? I mean, Councillor Quilty, sorry.
Councillor Bennett is back, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bennett's back. Maybe, Councillor Bennett, if you could make sure your camera's on speak for a moment so I can find you, because at the moment I've got a whole heap of caricatures. I haven't got Councillor Bennett in front of me, so I need to be able to see.
I'm here.
Aha! Thank you very much. You've just taken over somebody else's prime position on my screen. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Item 8.6, the Community Impact Infrastructure Grants for July 2021. Councillors' recommendation on page 196, 43 of the public agenda. Councillor Bennett moving. Is that why I'm getting jazz hands? Thank you. Do I have a seconder as per the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Some really great projects here. I think it's also really good, for me to remember that with the community infrastructure grants, like the money that if this passes tonight, gives back to these community groups who operate on a smell of an oily rag, what they will be able to do will greatly benefit so much of the community. And it is our job, just like for the state and federal, they collect taxes to pass on grants. So here we are doing the same thing. If grants didn't exist, we wouldn't have a library, we wouldn't have Baranduda Field Stadium, we wouldn't have the main street. So yay for grants. I did have one question, fully supportive of what the officers have recommended, and appreciate the panel decision and comments to give some more commentary about why certain things meet the criteria and meet a health and wellbeing plan, and why some of them don't. With the Wodonga Tennis Centre, they had one here for some solar and it doesn't meet our criteria, but I'm wondering maybe if Officer Hogg, could you talk about, this is something that council should be encouraging. So I'm assuming there are other grants available, state and federal, for the tennis club to be able to access solar and for other groups to access solar. And are there other community groups that have accessed grants to be able to have solar?
Officer Hogg.
Councillor Bennett, just further to that query, it is an area that clubs and organisations are starting to explore and showing an increased interest in what the opportunities are for obviously reasons that pertain to their operating costs, but also environmental reasons. The proposal is that in this particular instance, we do have further investigations with the club. It's a fairly complex area and we're finding that one size doesn't fit all, depending on the building, depending on the club's needs, depending on the opportunities. So we're finding that the frameworks around this space may either be funding or they actually may be upfront purchase, and again, this depends on the scale, it depends on the size, it depends on their tenure of use and the availability. In one particular instance, we are working with an organisation, a community organisation, who is negotiating directly with a power provider for a very beneficial opportunity, which would be the installation of such items and with a feed-in opportunity. So there's a range of frameworks, and we need to just work with those organisations on a club-by-club approach.
Thanks, Officer Hogg. I actually saw today in an email from DELP, so Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, they have their Climate Ready Hume newsletter, and they talked about some state government grants around solar for public buildings. And there's actually quite a lot of people in Hume that have got it. Some of our neighbours, so Barney, Chilton, Estelle and Myrtleford got it for their rec reserves. So in the email, they talked about having energy audits done, and then that would gear them up for funding through state government. So whether or not maybe when we look at our climate adaptation strategy in a few months, helping our clubs come up, like ensure they've got those audits ready to go. I'm not sure what's involved, but maybe if that's going to help them put them in good stead to get some state government grants, maybe that's something we could look at doing. I know each of these grants say that they help the clubs by saving about $8,000 a year per club, which for clubs is huge, and imagine what they could do with that savings. So I think we should be, looking at this and seeing what else we can do to make sure our clubs could apply for state funding for the same thing.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. CEO, just before I get to Councillor Watson as a seconder.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, we'll certainly have a look at those opportunities through the state government grants, but Councillor Bennett is correct that it's certainly an area where we're seeing grant opportunities. We're certainly talking to the federal grant scheme called ARENA, and ARENA is also looking at how they bring new technology in the battery storage space in addition to solar, and they're looking to trial some sites in Wodonga. So we've just started those negotiations. I just thought that was worth sharing. Thanks.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Watson as a seconder.
Mr Mayor, basically as per the recommendation, but probably just a note to the staff, and in particular Officer Hogg, that being in service clubs in the past, when things don't get up, there are some unsuccessful, if the motion gets through tonight, there are some unsuccessful claims here tonight. So, it's also worth looking at our service clubs in our community, because they give funds or they help out as well. So, let's help guide the ones that might not get up to other sources of income, and what you're talking about, Mr. CEO, of the other grants that are possible through state and federal governments. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillors? For or against? Thanks, Councillor Hall.
Sorry. I just got a question on one of them to Officer Hogg. With the Trudwin Neighbourhood House, the upgrade kitchen and disabled access, the panel notes, well, it seems like it meets all the criteria, but the panel notes don't really give a reason why they aren't supporting it.
So with Trudwin Neighbourhood House, there is it's a council building. There is a renewal opportunity coming up in the next year, and we'll be looking at how we can optimise that opportunity. So it's whilst it's a decline at this point in time, it's further discussion so we can optimise the work done.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Officer Hogg. Thanks, Councillor Hall. Did you want to speak for or against any further? No. It's okay. Councillor Mildren, I saw you with your hand up in there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ordinarily, I see this one as good expenditure of council money based on it supplying infrastructure to council-owned land or land associated with council activity. I find the work that the Cudgewell Rail Trail Advisory Committee do is absolutely magnificent. What worries me is we don't own or control any of that land. It's actually predominantly state government land or others. And it worries me that we put money into assets that are dealing with, state government land. We've spent a lot of money on the rail trail on land that we don't actually own or control. The advisory committee, as I understand it, and please, I trust Simone or somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the advisory committee is a committee to DELP, not to us, because we don't have control or influence over the land.
Did you want that question answered? Sorry, Councillor.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, Officer Hogg, I think I see you switching yourself live again. Yep.
You are correct. The Committee of Management is not to council on this land. The infrastructure grant program, however, does permit for works undertaken on not just council assets or council land, and we have funded those opportunities in the past through this program.
Thanks, Officer Hogg. Councillor Mildred.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, I really admire the work they do, and I think it's a great asset. And the actual rail trail is a good asset to our community. I think in the circumstances, I'll probably support this motion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty, haven't heard from you yet, have we?
You have before 8.4. I don't have to
okay,
add other than to say nothing other than to say that there is, in my opinion, no such thing as federal money, state money, or local government money. There is taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Bennett, in closing. No, all good. All right, councillors. Therefore, 8.6 as per the recommendation. I put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? Thank you. Carried 5-1. 8.7 is the draft financial plan for 2021 to 2031. Councillors, a recommendation on page 210. It's page 47 of the public agenda for those streaming at the moment. Does anybody wish to move a motion? Councillor Quilty, thank you. Is it as per the recommendation?
I would like to actually suggest a small amendment. Again, stand corrected if it's going to be a whole new alternative motion, but and I would like to speak to this motion, please, but I would like to change the word endorsed for a 21-day public exhibition period for the word put out for the 21-day public exhibition period. The purpose of this change is to separate two different processes: the process of putting up a document for public exhibition versus the process of council adopting a document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. CEO, I'll go to you. I can't see that being an issue. Is there any reason as to why we would need to have the word endorsed versus to put out to community?
Oh, look, I think we could change that wording, but I really don't see the need. All we're saying in paragraph 1 is that we're endorsing the plan to go out for public exhibition. We're not saying anything else. We're not making a decision on it at this stage. It'll go out, or we're endorsing it to go out for public exhibition. It then comes back with all of those comments taken on board and is represented to council for adoption. So I think there is absolutely no need to change the recommendation, but potentially it wouldn't be contentious to change it.
All right. Well, Councillor Quilty, I'll see if you've got a seconder on that one before I come back to see if you'll speak to it. Do we have a seconder on Councillor Quilty? Councillor, which one do you want? I've got Hall and Mildred both at once. I'll take Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty. Please speak for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Financial plan is, I would like to start by thanking the finance team for preparing such a clear and a self-explanatory document. I especially liked the summary on the third page of the document showing where this document fits. I would like to emphasize once again that this document is supposed to, it's a high-level document. It is supposed to show us how we propose to finance the actions that are contained in the council plan. However, this document is very high level and it is supposed to be the basis, the foundation of creating a budget and adopting a budget, which is to provide more detail on how we're going to finance that. However, this year we had to do a cart before the horse and do the budget first and the financial plan later. However, I encourage members of the community, once it goes out for public exhibition, to have a look at it, even though we have already voted on the budget. And I will quickly outline the items of it that stood out to me. As I said, a lot of it is a 10-year document. A lot of it has been reflected in the budget. However, the first couple of years of shown in the financial plan are different from the budget, and I'm assuming it is due to more certainty. We prepared budget earlier. The officers prepared the budget earlier than they prepared the plans, so I'm assuming there is more certainty involved and there is more certainty available when preparing the plan. I would like to point out that it is prepared on the conservative basis in terms of grants. The capital grants that haven't been confirmed haven't been included to add to the certainty. The other thing to note, there are ratios on page 223 of the whole of our agenda. They tend to drop after the first couple of years, and that could be again due to uncertainty and more information available for the first couple of years. It is prepared on the basis of the rate increase of 1.5%. However, in 2022, there is 1 additional % of rates added on due to natural growth. The additional rates that may be highly likely will be collected due to new properties. In the final 5 years of the plan, the rates are budgeted to increase incrementally, gradually, to reach the increase of 2% in the final year. And again, emphasizing it, people would have heard it during the budget process. A curbside collection is budgeted to drop 1.7%. However, waste management levy is budgeted to increase 13.68%. There is 4 million budgeted for in the borrowings to fund the council depot building. The increase in staff expenditure is budgeted for steady 2.8% every year. Capital works budgets in the plan is roughly 4 million each below that what was budgeted for financial years 22 and 23, which I assume is also due to greater degree of certainty for the first couple of years. Human resources expenses are broken up into, which is a quite interesting and useful way to report. They are broken up into male, female, and self-described genders, and into the several areas of employment. I have observed that total female human resource expense is somewhat up compared to the total male ones. Full-time male human resource expenses are somewhat up than full-time female human resources expenses, and part-time female human resources are significantly up compared to part-time male expenses. There is $0 budgeted for self-described gender human resources expenses. Financial performance indicators and ratios are budgeted to drop over the years, except for the ones that have rate revenue coming in, such as rate revenue versus adjusted underlying revenue, expenses over number of properties assessment, and total rate revenue over number of properties assessment. But I won't dwell on this now. I think people are getting bored. And two more. The total amount of debt as of 30th of June 2021 is 16.6 million. We have three reserves on the financials. One is developers contributions reserve. It is budgeted for 200,000 incoming every year for the duration of 10 years and 0 coming out for each year during the 10 years. Next reserve is a waste management reserve, budgeted for 0 coming into the reserve during the 10 years, and 70 in the first year, 70 grand in the first, 70,000 in the first year coming out, 200,000 coming out, and the second year, 200,000 coming out in the third year. And defined benefit super call-up reserve, also similar budget, 200,000 budgeted for coming in every year, and 70,000, 200,000, and 250,000 coming budgeted to come out of the reserves for the first 3 years. So I absolutely vote for putting it up for community consultation. I absolutely encourage members of the community to have a look at it and to let us know what they think. And if any members of the community feel like calling me and having a chat about it, it probably won't happen, but I'll be so happy if it does. Thank you.
Good on you, Councillor Quilty. On every council or board committee, there's always someone who crunches the numbers better than the rest of us, and I think you're our nominee for that. Councillor Hall, you were the seconder?
No, I don't have anything to say. I think Councillor Quilty's covered the quite much.
Councillor Mildred, I think you had your hand up in there somewhere. No, change of heart, or I misread that?
No, Mr. Mayor, it was
that
just
was
for the seconding.
Sorry, wasn't it? Did you want to speak for this one, or no? All good. Councillor Bennett or Councillor Watson? No. Okay. Councillor Quilty, in closing, I think you might have covered it all off.
Thank you for putting up with me.
All right, councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. On to item 8.8. This one's a tender for W2320-21 supply and delivery of a small road/footpath single cabin drivable sweeper unit. Councillors, a recommendation on page 248, page 52 of the public agenda. Would somebody like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Mildred. As per the recommendation, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I understand this correctly, we're actually getting back something that we lost a long time ago, a small sweeper that will be able to do the inner urban areas of our city. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, and I think it's a good thing that we are doing this sort of stuff again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildred. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, as ditto Councillor Mildred's comments, it is probably a good thing to keep our street or our area, smaller areas nice and clean. And thanks to Leon and his team to get a good quotation through.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Other councillors, for or against? Councillor Hall.
Yeah, just to note that it's 21,891 above our estimate budget, which we had a budget allowance for it that was in the approved budget. Sometimes these things are hard to quantify pricing until you go out to tender and do an apples for apples type of quotation. We do have the money in the waste management reserve, and this money is set aside for buyers like this. So it won't make any difference to our budget in the long run.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty or Bennett? No. Thank you. Councillor Mildren, in closing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, there's an awful lot of things that we should be doing in our central business area to breathe some life back into things after COVID and to try and generally spark things up again. This is really good because this is something that will be seen in our community. It'll be seen doing the work that it gets done. It'll be seen to be dealing with the streetscape. It'll be interacting with our traders and other people in the street. This is something that we probably should have been doing again. We used to do it a good number of years ago, and it's something we probably should have been doing more recently. I think this will have a fairly significant, well, a reasonably significant impact, more than just keeping the streets clean. The fact that it's there and it's seen, it'll have a positive impetus. There's many more things that we should be doing in the central business areas to try and improve things. But I think this is a good start and the step in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. And just before I put the motion, if I can say that my son will be more than happy to see a little street sweeper getting around. Kids love machinery like that, don't they? Just love those things happening in the streets. I'll therefore put the motion. Councillors, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 8.9, the tender for the Footpath and Recreational Paths Renewal Program for 2021-2022. I guess that'll give the little machine something to sweep as well. Officer recommendation on page 254 of the public agenda. It's page 58. Did somebody, Councillor Watson, was that moving as per recommendation for 8.9? Thank you. Thumbs up. Seconder, please, councillors. Councillor Mildren. I'll give Councillor Mildren, I think might have been trying just outside camera scope. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors. With me doing my rehab walking the footpaths, and with COVID, with so many people out walking, to making sure our footpaths and our are trip-free and built well and repaired and renewed will be a great thing for our city. I think we have some of the best footpaths and connections in a regional city. It's a fantastic asset we have in our city. So the contracts there to keep building great pathways for our city.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Officer Klein will recall, one of my favourite things to support is the asset renewal projects and asset renewal program. And I see this as an absolutely essential component of ensuring that we maintain our assets in perpetuity. This sort of work, albeit just footpaths and other pathways, might be seen as not very pretty in the world of things, but this is absolutely integral to maintaining our assets, from the small aspects of this sort of thing through to bridges, roads and other structures that we have to maintain to ensure longevity and in perpetuity use of these assets. So this is the sort of thing that is the bread and butter of councils, and we should be continuing and making sure that we keep this stuff up to date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Bennett, I did know you were happy to second. Did you want to speak? All good. Any councillors wish to speak against or speak for any further? Thank you. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Carried unanimously. Item 8.10 is the priority projects for 21-22. Investigation planning to shovel readiness. Officer recommendation on page 260, which is 64 of the public agenda. Happy to move as per recommendation, Councillor Bennett. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Was that Councillor Quilty happy to second? I did see your hand up there after Councillor Bennett.
I was going to suggest an alternative, but I guess I lost my opportunity now.
That's okay, yep. So I've got a seconder, I think, as per recommendation of Councillor Watson. Is that right, Councillor Watson? Okay, Councillor Bennett, thank you.
So these are the priority projects that councils come up with in consultation with councillors, with officers, with community and with government priorities. We've already set aside 500,000 in the budget to do the scoping out work of these particular priority works. So one of the main things that will come out of that is the actual costing. This is really critical for us to be doing right now for two reasons. One, because we're going into a state election and a federal election, and those parties, those candidates will be looking for, you know, shovel-ready projects to be able to have them as election promises. So it's really important that we have this work ready so we can take advantage of any opportunities come up like that. And then secondly, even if we weren't going into an election, it's really important for our long-term capital works budget. We, you know, plan 10 years ahead. So for us to be able to actually make an informed decision about, are we going to put these in our budget, we need to know the costing of it. So with this work, when this is scoped out, all of that work will come back to council, back to councillors to make a decision on. So nothing, you know, us approving this now doesn't mean that, you know, the senior citizen centre is just going to go ahead without us knowing. All these projects will come back for approval from us. The 5 that we've got here is Wodonga Creek Community Waterway Activation, Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre redevelopment, Baranduda Township redevelopment, Wodonga Exhibition Centre redevelopment, and Senior Citizens Centre. Another great point with this is certainly out of COVID, lots of the government priorities seem to be around tourism, and most of these link into that, which is really great. There was one other thing, I think, like, I've been really aware of this since, you know, in my 5 years on council, is that lots of the big infrastructure projects that we've been able to deliver on over the past 5 years has been the hard work of previous councils and previous councillors doing that work, and then we, you know, get to deliver the end product. So in terms of looking forward and ensuring that we do have vision for what, you know, future councils will be, you know, being able to open. So we're going to do that work now so that future councils, you know, have that vision, and that we don't just, you know, fall stagnant, and make sure we've still got stuff coming up that our community can be excited about.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
I'll just probably re-endorse everything that Councillor Bennett said, but I think we've got 3 years of our term still to go, and I think this is probably one tick box list that we can get going. But I think before we finish our term, we should have another list of projects or ideas, or you know, those thinking outside the box programs that we could get going for our city, for our region. So it's always good, because the things we're working on at the moment have been past council terms, and some go back many council terms, such as High Street. So it's only a great thing to make sure we have projects, vision, thinking, strategies to take us further into the future for future councils to endorse and to act on. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors? Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support Councillor Bennett and Councillor Watson in saying that it is good and necessary work, and that any of these feasibility studies and costings should come back to Council for consideration once they're done. I have lost my opportunity to suggest to vote on each project separately to give the councillors the opportunity to voice their preference for some over the other if they had any, but just for the sake of it, it's not a great loss of mine. I would like to point out just one thing. There is a summary description of, and again, I appreciate that it is just a feasibility study and just a suggestion of an initial step. However, I feel I should point out on page 266 of the agenda, in the summary of the projects, there is one concerning Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre redevelopment, which reads, undertake a feasibility and cost-benefit study of further investment into Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre, in particular the pool versus an alternate model of delivery for wet sport and the future potential of the Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre. It sounds to me a little bit like we are preparing to lose Wodonga's only indoor pool. If we are contemplating it, it's a very expensive toy, but it would be a great loss to the community of all generations. We already spent a lot of money on this pool, just upgraded the filtration system and a lot of other things. And there are several amounts of money earmarked in the long-term budget to be spent on the pool, such as 2.5 million earmarked for a 25-26 financial year, which is, long-term and not yet as important as 2021-2022 budget, however. And $300,000 in 23, 24 and 25 financial years each. So I thought I'd just point that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Quilty. Just CEO, just on Councillor Quilty's point, and I must say all my kids have learned to swim in that pool. It's not necessarily saying that we're getting rid of the Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre. This is just sort of a clarity question for me. This is the essential plan that we need to go and say, hey, what does the future Wodonga need in terms of aquatics facilities, and also does that mean a new indoor facility versus the current one being upgraded? It's all the calculations done in the background on that. Is that the correct understanding?
Look, I think everything that Councillor Quilty has said is correct, and everything that you've said is correct. You know, the existing facility, we spent a lot of money on it. It's an aging facility, and as it continues to age, the renewal on that facility will continue to cost us a lot of money. So this is the very early piece of feasibility work that looks at all of the options, and we don't want to predetermine anything, but we certainly recognise that Wodonga needs some form of indoor swimming facility. So I think this first piece of planning will be interesting, and it should be broad, and it should look at the need and the demand into the future, and also the cost and sustainability of various options into the future as well. And of course, it will come back to a council meeting once that feasibility study has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillors Hall or Mildren? Did either of you? Thank you, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all of these projects, by and large, are admirable. It's probably not the priority list in the order that I would have selected, but I'm only one. I don't actually think we have adequate structures in place to actually deal with these sorts of decision-making processes. We're left with this priority list effectively being set and presented to us by officers. And I think the comments that Councillor Quilty made earlier about perhaps dealing with them one by one in terms of priority might have been a better way to deal with it, given that we don't have other formal structures in place where we could actually do this legitimately under the Act. In terms of some of these processes, they're not going to happen if we don't get the government grants. Now, I know there's an anticipation of elections and things. We are in a very different environment to that which we've been in recent past elections, because we've had state and Commonwealth governments spending massive amounts of money on COVID issues of all different sorts, and the levels of funding for these sorts of things will not be there as it were, say, for the previous federal election, for example. So I think unless the officers know something that we don't know, and they haven't been able to tell us for various reasons, I expect, these grants may or may not come to fruition. So some of these projects might slip back a bit. The ones that are reliant on grants might slide. I think the opportunities for economic development, in my opinion, should be the ones that go to the top of the tree, but that's just my view again. But fundamentally, this is not a bad bunch of 5. I can probably think of another 5 or maybe even 10 more projects that we could add to this list, and I think Councillor Watson alluded to that previously and suggested that we need to do that work. I suggest we need to put a structure in place where we can really hammer this stuff out in a proper manner. Let's see what we come with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, did you want to add? Thank you.
Look, I agree that, I mean, I'm happy with all of these recommendations. The only one, and as Councillor Coulty made note, was the Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre redevelopment. The wording on page 261 says, in particular, the pool versus an alternate model of delivery for wet sport and future potential of the Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre. What are we aiming at doing there? Because I've got awful feelings that it just sounds like we want to close it and look at alternative, maybe over in Albury. I don't know, but it just, and I know a lot of people, especially elderly people, that use it for exercise daily. So it really does concern me, this. Can we get some clarity on that?
Certainly, Councillor Hall, the CEO, is prepared to answer that one. Thanks, you, CEO.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hall. That's certainly not our intention. I think we recognise how valuable an indoor pool facility is for our community. So this initial feasibility work will probably look at the long-term future for where that could be, and it could stay where it is, and it could be a replacement pool in Wodonga Sports and Leisure Centre. It could be an alternate facility at Waves, or it could involve putting a roof on the facility at Waves. I guess at this very early stage in the planning process, we want to give the consultants a pretty broad scope to look at all of those options, look at the cost of all of those options, do some needs analysis as we grow as a city, and bring that work back to councillors. So it's certainly not our intention as part of this is to give up that facility and rely on one in Albury. That was not part of our thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Probably note, Councillor Hall, that we'll all accept Albury's money to make sure we have it covered in full on the Wodonga side of the river.
It's a lot of elderly people use it for exercise. They go there daily, actually, many of them. And for us to partner a facility in Albury would not be suitable unless we need an indoor facility in Wodonga. So I just want clarity on that because it read a little bit different to me. But anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Hall, and I appreciate your smile there, Councillor Mildred, on my comments. Councillor Bennett, in closing.
Yeah, just in closing, it's good to hear people talking about, we wouldn't be able to deliver these projects without grants, because grants are so important for organisations and community groups to function. Another important thing for us to consider is when we get the outcomes of these priority projects is, what do we need to make them happen? Is it grants? Is it land sales? Is it, what other avenues have we got to fund these things? So that'll be important for us to consider when they come back to us.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. Just a reminder, it is as per the recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously for 8.10. 8.11, the draft Wodonga open space strategy. There's a request for authorisation to commence public exhibition, councillors. And just before I mention the recommendations on page 267, it's page 69 of the public agenda. There's a table of documents as well, which I would encourage the community to read. Us councillors were given some weeks in advance notice. I'm sure we're all appreciative of that, to wade our way through that and cross-reference all the documents and what a body of work it is. So do I have a mover of a motion? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I'm going to say I think was fast draw there, and I'm assuming that's as per recommendation, and Councillor Watson, you were happy to second. Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thanks. So this is a massive body of work, probably one of the biggest bodies of work I reckon I've seen in my 5 years. And so this looks at how we manage all our existing and future public open space. So it's been really clear in the document what this does look at and what this doesn't look at. So we've got about, I think it was 429 hectares of public open space. And this document does a good job at acknowledging the environmental, the economical and social benefits of this and how important it is. My question was just going to be, this is such a big body of work. How do we synthesize this in a way for community to actually have some meaningful say on this? This encompasses so many other different strategies. How can community look at this and in a meaningful way and be able to give us feedback on it?
CEO, happy for you to direct that question to perhaps Director Schultz. Would that be right? Or you can...
Now, look, that would certainly be right because it is a huge document. But what I will say before I just ask Leon to explain it to us is obviously we've tried to break it down because it is such a big document. So in terms of community people listening in tonight, you should be able to read the strategy and get a feel for everything by just reading the strategy. If you then have a particular interest in a particular topic, look at all of the list of separate additional enclosures. You may not need to read them all, but you'll see specific additional detail in those areas that you're particularly interested in. But Leon, over to you.
I think the CEO has enunciated exactly what I would have said, was that the strategy itself is a pretty comprehensive, all-encompassing document. But if there are specific parts that any member of the community has a clear interest in, the strategy is supported by 8 or 9 specialist other documents which should respond to any queries which they may have. One of the things is we are suggesting a 4-week consultation or engagement process. That may be, in hindsight, that may be a little short. The councillors may wish to consider extending that by an additional 4 weeks, perhaps.
Thank you, Director Schultz. Councillor Bennett, the motion was with you. That's some good advice. I mean, we as councillors know what we worked our way through. Would you consider that as a?
Yep, that's great. I'm glad I asked the question. I'd be happy to extend the consultation period.
Yep, Councillor Watson as a seconder. Are you happy to extend that date? Okay, yep. Thank you. Councillor.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yes, Councillor Mildren.
What are the words we're using? Because there's no words in there at the present moment that talk about timeframes.
Let me find the page of the recommendation, sorry.
6-7.
Endorse public exhibition in accordance with Council's communications and engagement plan. And CEO, I'll turn to you for guidance of wording, or perhaps Deputy CEO Deb Munter. I think
would it be the draft Wodonga open space strategy and appended documents be authorised for public exhibition for for 6 weeks, for 8 weeks, and then just the rest in accordance with
we're getting thumbs up, Kat. So for 8 weeks, outside of that, as it stands. Thank you. Mover, seconder, all good. Councillors, back to you. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A document like this, to try and get any meaningful communication and feedback, I think the traditional methodologies of engagement might be a bit lacking. And I think others have sort of intimated to that already as well. Maybe this is the type of document that we should be targeting various different groups and going out and meeting with them and talking to them about the various aspects that might fit to the different groups that we're dealing with. I think just expecting this stuff to go out and then draw those groups in might be a bit too much, a step too far. I mean, for example, there's a whole lot of different things in the hills that come under this sort of documentation, which we should be going and talking to the various different groups that are associated with that to get their views on things like, the different trails. I think, if my memory serves me, there's a half a dozen or 4 different trails that look at areas around the hills that need to be addressed. There's things like pocket parks that appear in the vast majority of residential areas, and there's different communities at different stages of life that we really should be talking to those people and making sure that they understand what it is we're doing.
Councillor Mildren, I just might interrupt there if I can, just because Director Schultz has jumped in. Sorry, Councillor Bennett, I've seen your hand.
I think Leon's going to.
Yeah, I think Director Schultz is probably going to give us some information or clarity on how we distribute that information. Is that right, Leon?
No.
Under pressure, Mr. Mayor, I think it's on page 270 of the council agenda, sets out a number of tools that can be used. And, we'll certainly be working very closely with our comms and marketing team to make sure that we go as wide and as deep as we possibly can to encourage all of the community groups, internal, external stakeholders to be part of the process. And perhaps that's why I suggested, going out for a little longer than what we originally planned. So it is intended to go as wide and as deep as we possibly can to sweep up all the commentary that is available out there.
Thanks, Director Schultz. I've just got a hand fight here at the moment because I've got the CEO who's interested to add some further to you. Kat, did you want to ask one more question, Kat, before the CEO answers? Go for it.
I wanted to clarify with Councillor Mildren's comment about the hills. My reading of this is that this doesn't actually cover the hills. So I'm just making sure my reading is correct, that this doesn't actually go into direct detail with the hills.
Director Schultz is coming back into the room again there.
Again, Councillor Bennett, it doesn't override or supplant the hills strategy, but builds and complements any work in and around the hills. They will be seen as complementary documents.
Thank you, Director Schultz. CEO, you did have your hand up. Did you still have something to add?
Look, I was just going to acknowledge, I think the commentary around how we best engage the community, we'll certainly take that on board and use all of those tools allowed and available to us. This is, of course, the second round of public engagement and consultation, and it was actually pleasing and surprising that the first round got quite a lot of feedback. So there's obviously a lot of groups out there who may not have an interest in every element of this strategy, but they've certainly got interest in particular parts. And this is the second round of engagement, and we'll certainly go back and sort of check in with those people who responded to the first round of engagements, and we'll use all those tools, as mentioned in the report, to make sure we consult properly. I think giving us that additional period and a further 4 weeks will help with that. Thank you.
Councillor Mildren, I treated your commentary as a question a moment ago. I'm just worried I may have, as chair, overstepped that Councillor Watson hadn't spoke second. But did I get you, Councillor Watson? I just may have lost track and not put a tick beside your name. Then I'll come back to you, Councillor Mildren.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a really opportune time for it to be going out for public consultation, because with COVID, we've had sort of 18 months, maybe a bit longer, that people have been housebound and walking around their own neighbourhood. I've never seen so many people walking and being out in our parks. And when we've had the park shut and then reopened the play equipment, it's been fantastic to see so many people out and about. So once the football's over, I could wear a shirt to have public, they can contact council for any comments about pathways and the gardens and everything like that. So I'm looking forward. I think it's a good move that it's going to have longer consultation, but we need to have a lot of activation of getting some media out there to do that. And I think your Tuesday chat tomorrow would probably be a great opportunity to get that started, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what I'm suggesting is a bit further than what's being interpreted. I think we should be actively taking this into different groups, not just inviting them to participate. I think there's a range of different groups, and I think I'm hearing that we probably know who they are already, because some of them will have already had an involvement. But I think we should actually be doing a roadshow, if you want to use that sort of terminology, and going to certain interest groups around the place and getting this out into those groups and getting their feedback, actually actively seeking to do it. It's something a bit different to what we've done on a lot of these sorts of things in the past here. And I think this is such an enormous project and an enormous strategy, and it's got such a long lead time and a long lifespan. This document, in theory, could potentially be around for the next 25 or 30 years. And I think we really do need to get it off on the right foot with the massive effort to try and get as many people as we possibly can actually engaged rather than just inviting to be engaged. I just think there's a lot of things that we need to do, and I think we need to be prepared to have that feedback come back to us. We need to be prepared to sit down and go through that stuff and identify the various different things. And I'm absolutely certain there's going to be conflicting requests and contradictory requirements and all the rest of it. But we need to have a process in place that we can actually deal with those things and modify and adjust whatever it is we need to modify and adjust, and set different priorities and assume the priorities as we go through it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall or Councillor Quilty? Councillor Quilty.
Thank you. I certainly agree that this is a huge body of work and it is incredibly important, and I certainly encourage every member of the community or community groups to have a look at it, and I encourage the most time for people to at the very least read the table of contents. I really like Councillor Mildren's suggestion that we should be actively seeking the input from the community. If we can't afford to do a full-blown roadshow, given the finance and the COVID restriction constraints, we should at least try to write to people knowing community leaders or representatives of community groups by name, inviting them to participate. Active participation is what I would look for, not just in this particular area, but in all areas where we take community consultation. And but of course, we need to make sure that people understand the formal process, to make sure that we are not relying on what may be marked as hearsay. So I'm not sure how we're going to do that, whether we need an alternative motion or something, but I fully support the idea to actively seek community feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Hall?
Yeah, like the others said, it's a large body of work. I do agree it needs a longer time for community to actually pick it up and read it. So the extending the time of community consultation and feedback is a good idea. The only thing is too, I was wondering whether maybe there could be a condensed summary. I think we did that with the Hills at one stage, but there's a lot of people who are going to look at that and go, that's too big, I can't bother reading it. And maybe for the people that don't want to, maybe a summary. I know that's difficult to summarise everything in a condensed format, but I think we need to maybe look at something that maybe once they read the summary, they might be encouraged to read the bigger document. But I just find a lot of people would probably find that too big and not bother. But anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. And I think, yeah, we did touch on that. Sorry, CEO, I just saw you put your hand up, but just there is that, I think it's 80 pages is essentially what you're suggesting is the best place for the summary at the moment. Is that correct, CEO?
Look, what I'm suggesting is that our wonderful marketing and engagement team led by Kelly will look at all of those options. And I'm not saying we can get things condensed onto a page or whatever, but we'll look at digestible summaries for those attachments, and certainly to the other comments, good comments raised, you know, the engagement, it's certainly our intention to lean forward with that engagement and engage, not just wait for people to engage us, but lean forward into those special interest groups, the Friends of groups, the Wodonga development industry, the sport and rec groups, and also there's statutory groups involved as well. So I think an approach where we lean forward into the community will be good, and giving us that extra time will allow us to do that better.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Bennett, in closing. Nothing further. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 9.1 is the preparation of the Wodonga Council Gender Equality Action Plan. There is an officer recommendation on page 346, page 76 of the public agenda. Would somebody like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Bennett,
I
as
thought-
per the recommendation.
Yeah, I didn't realise I thought we were just. I didn't realise.
Yeah, I know it's
noting.
noting, so, but
Just noting it.
yeah, but you happy to move? Do I need a
If
seconder?
it needs to be moved, yep.
Yep. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Does anyone wish to speak against? I'll carry that one unanimously. Thank you. Oh, sorry,
I would-
Councillor.
I would
Councillor
like to speak, but not against. I would like to point out just one thing, just to point out more for the benefit of my colleagues, the councillors. On page 349 of the minutes for today, there is a bit about councillor survey participation. A survey is going to be put out to council within this body of work, and the participation is entirely voluntary for each councillor. I very much support it being voluntary. It may be the survey questions. I don't know what they're going to be like, but it may be touching on the things that may be considered deeply private by some individuals. So that's all. I just thought I would draw people's attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Just to confirm, we did carry that one unanimously, and thanks for your comments for pointing that out. That's good. No worries. On to item 10, councillors. As usual, each month we've got a bucket load of reports there in front of us. I'll go through. Please just take yourself off mute and jump out if you'd like to speak to one of these reports, but essentially they're just for noting. 10.1, the planning report for August 2021. 10.2 is the building report for August 2021. The 10.3 is the competitive services report on page 359 of yours, or 89 in the public. Fine. The record of councillor meetings on 10.4. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 10.4, I would like to correct on page 363. It says that I was present for all items in the strategic briefing on the 23rd of August. Unfortunately, I was not. I had to leave just before the presentation done for Development Victoria regarding Junction Place. I had to go to medical appointment. I requested the permission to record that part of the meeting, but for good reasons, I assume I was denied that permission. So I was not present. Unfortunately, I wish I could have present, but there was no way I could have missed that appointment. So yeah, I wasn't present. All items I would love to have been present.
Councillor Quilty, you are 100% correct. I recall that being the case. And sorry that's not reflected correctly. We will get that adjusted by the governance officer.
Thank you.
For records. Thank you. Councillor Mildren, sorry, do you have a question on that one as well?
Mr. Mayor, I think you'll find that I was missing. I had to go for part of that as well.
Yeah, I know you missed from midday, Councillor Mildren. Were you with us before all of that?
I was there for the whole of the show up till about midday, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Our governance officer will correct that record for that meeting. Thank you, councillors, for pulling me up on that one. 10.5 is the decisions register. Anything in there, councillors? No. Item 11, notices of motion, of which there are none. On to our petitions, councillors. Item 12.1, the petition for speed limits on Baranduda Boulevard. Recommendation on page 375 of our agenda, or 105 of the public agenda. Geez, it'd be nice to have the public agenda to read each month, wouldn't it, councillors? But would somebody like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Mildren, as per the recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bennett, thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against or speak for? No? Happy for me to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson, I'll come back to you. Councillor Mildren, thank you as the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting. This has been around for a long time, and we've had numerous conversations about it over the journey. And Vic Roads have had involvement, the police have had involvement in making decisions about this sort of stuff. I think this is the correct decision to make at this point in time. I think the volumes of traffic and the associated speed limits and the way it's structured and the distances work okay for the present time. But I do recognise that there is a future issue that needs to be dealt with. It would be inappropriate to impose constraints in terms of speed limit to deal with a future issue. It will be an issue in the future, and particularly when Baranduda Fields gets functional, shall we say, till people start coming and going from there, then we will have another issue with added traffic and added intersecting points, and there may well be good justification to change it then. But right at the minute, there isn't adequate justification under the various rules and procedures and requirements that have to be checked and balanced to go through to get an answer. So that's why I support the recommendation or support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Bennett? No, nothing to add. Councillor Watson, you did wish to speak. I'll come back to you, Councillor Quilty.
No, nothing for or against it. I did have a phone call from a resident from the aged care facility, and they did sort of, they've had a group of people there talking about it. I'm sure the officers have heard about it, but as I said to them, it's a working document and it'll change as traffic conditions change, and as Councillor Mildred said, as the sports development occurs, things will change again. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm about to put you on the spot. I believe we are geographically in the right area for you to mention that lovely letter that we have received regarding the school crossing that you showed us during the briefing. I believe you were intending to mention it in the meeting.
Yeah, it looks slightly unrelated, Councillor Quilty. Happy to take that one now and mention it, but had a lovely letter from a Year 2 student, of which we're getting a response to that student at the moment. It was regarding a school crossing more so along Baranduda Boulevard, but it is obviously timely, I guess, not just with this petition, but obviously we make it public that the council are very well aware with that growth corridor and what is happening out there, and we appreciate the patience from some of that community. So, yeah, thank you, Councillor Quilty, for picking up on that one. Does anybody else wish to speak any further? Councillor Mildren, you happy for me to put the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you unanimously. Now, councillors, I'll expect nothing more but good conversation from some of you in this next one. And before we get into 12.2, thank you, Councillor Mildren, for raising a hand to remind me. I had it on my notes here, but you previously on the topic of junction would have had a conflict of interest in previous years and past lives gone by, but you would requested the leave opportunity to explain to the public why you won't be declaring a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to go around this in as detailed as I can, but as concisely as I can. Around 2011, my business was contracted to the council for various planning and economic development projects, including strategic planning and some representation of council in respect to early planning for the former railway station land that's now become Junction Place. In late 2013, my business was provided with an opportunity to have involvement in the detailed planning for the former railway station land, and that involvement extended to around September 2016. Part of my professional involvement included working with the successful bidder for the Junction Place development up until around September 2016. That was only part of the involvement. I had a lot of other stuff prior to that. I have had no professional or other involvement with the Junction Place project or the successful bidder since around September 2016. In the interest of transparent accountability, I declared a conflict of interest on all matters associated with Junction Place and council throughout my first 4 years as an elected councillor, despite the fact that I no longer had any association with the development project or the company doing the project. It's now 5 years since I or my business has had any association with the Junction Place project or any people associated with the project. Therefore, I do not believe I am conflicted in any way in considering matters associated with the Junction Place project in my role as a councillor. I believe my professional qualifications and more than 30 years experience in economic development can make a constructive contribution to the development and growth of Wodonga CBD, inclusive of the impacts of Junction Place as part of the CBD. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. And as I mentioned before, we got that declaration. I really expect some conversation out of us all here this evening, because this has probably been the biggest topic to come across in front of us, and albeit And I say this reservedly, only a petition at this point in time that we're having this conversation. But this is in regards to the planning permit application 73/2021. There is a recommendation on page 381. Is somebody happy to move? Thank you, Councillor Quilty. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Quilty.
Look, I won't speak at length. I would firstly like to thank all the members of the community for taking such keen interest in the affairs of the city. And I would like to encourage the members of the community to keep up this good work, engaging with us, not just on this matter, but on any matters of community interest. I would also like to proceed with a question to clarify something. May I ask, through Mr. Mayor, may I ask the CEO a question?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Thank you. So the media reported that the CEO made it known the matter has been deferred. The matter regarding the Junction Square master plan has been deferred. Can I please have the confirmation that it has been deferred?
Yes, Councillor Quilty. Development Victoria and the private developer have put a pause on the application. I think that's the correct planning term. And they've recognised the need to consult with our community, and that consultation and the details of it are now out there in the public domain, and we strongly encourage everybody with an interest in this to attend those sessions. But I think the recognition from Development Victoria is a positive one in that they've realised that they need to deal with any changes to the master plan sequentially as the first priority before they then actually progress their application for the use of that particular site or a beverage facility. So that can be confirmed, that has happened, and the focus now will be on that community consultation and engagement over the master plan first and foremost, and some proponents of it will come later. Officer Schultz will correct me if there's any changes to that, but we've definitely had that notification come through from Development Victoria.
That's correct, CEO.
Thank you, Director Schultz. Councillor Quilty, that was a question. Did you want to speak any further?
Yes, thank you very much for clarifying this, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. It's a matter of great community interest and great concern. I will be keenly waiting for this matter to come before council, and I encourage everyone to make their opinion known to us via official channels. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Bennett.
Thanks. Just again to reiterate what the CEO said, there are 4 sessions coming up for the Development Victoria, who are actually proposing this, for community to give their feedback. So if you just jump on to Council's Facebook page, that lists the 4 different sessions, and you can just register for them. They'll all be online. So really encourage people to, again, have their say on that. The only other one I did have, so what we're doing here is we're not making a decision about, you know, Dan Murphy's or about anything at Junction. We are just accepting this petition. That's what we're, you know, talking about. I brought this up at briefing when this petition first came up to us. I think we can, I mean, through this process, there are many things to learn, but one of them related specifically to this, which is what this item is all about, just this petition, is making it clear to people who are, you know, going on our website and taking our template to be able to make a petition for themselves, that in planning matters, a petition actually is only one formal submission. To have that up front, I think maybe if people knew that, of course, signing a petition is fantastic, but that they might understand that it's more weight to send an individual submission. So, and some people might just be happy with signing the petition. That's great, but they might think that their one signature is classified as one formal objection, whereas the petition as a whole is actually only classified as one formal objection or submission, sorry. So just to, in our communications, to have that up front, that signing a petition actually is only one, global submission. I just want to make sure when people are signing petitions, they know exactly what they're doing.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillors? Councillor Mildren, I think, was moving first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The petition in itself asks for a series of things. I know we're actually looking to accept it as one single submission or objection, as the terms used in the now moved motion. But the petition's actually asking for a couple of things to happen, which is different to the way the planning application consideration goes. My reading of the petition, and I'll stand to have other opinions, obviously, but my reading is that the petition is seeking to have Development Victoria withdraw their consent to the application in the first instance, and the second component is to then have council to refuse the planning application. So the second part is correct in what we're doing by referring the planning, the petition as a submission to the planning application. But the first part, I think, may require some other consideration as to what we do about that. Now, maybe we can't actually act on that until after the petition's been tabled and referred off to a report to come back, or maybe we should be doing something different tonight. At this point, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I do think we have to address that as an issue at some point. I note that I think the principal person who organised the petition actually submitted a comment to us today suggesting that we'd misinterpreted or didn't copy it across accurately as to what was proposed. I think there was a bit of both ways in that. When I read through the documentation and had a look, I saw both forms of comment actually referred to. So I don't think one was wrong and one was right. I think both were right and both were wrong at the same time. So, but I think that's pretty much immaterial to the actual way this has to go. I'd be interested to know what other councillors think about how we deal with the issues of the request in the petition to have Places Victoria withdraw their consent. Now, I do recognise that it's not Places Victoria who are the applicant. And I know Councillor Bennett referred to Places Victoria's project and so on a few minutes ago, but there's a fine difference there between who is the applicant and who's the owner of the land. There's two components about that I think we have to mould into the way we look at this project or this, petition. One is Development Victoria can withdraw their consent to the developer to develop the project if they so choose. We can't say that they should or they shouldn't do that. It's not our role. But in terms of the planning application, Development Victoria's consent is not a prerequisite. Development Victoria only need to be notified about the application. It's the applicant, and I haven't seen a copy of the application in detail to know what specific name's been put on the application at this point, but it's the applicant who controls the process. Now, if the applicant hasn't come to the council and asked for the application to be put on hold, then my understanding is that the statutory clock continues to tick. So the question that
Councillor Mildren, the CEO is confirming that the applicant has paused the application.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, thank you.
There's
probably a whole range of things, but I guess I'd like to hear what other councillors have to say about how we deal with the petition request in respect to asking Development Victoria to withdraw their consent to the developer to go ahead with the project.
Councillor Mildred, just before I know the CEO's just raised his hand to question that, but I think all councillors would be in a similar position, that it almost reads as if it's a petition to both organisations written as one in terms of how you could interpret it. So that could possibly be advice in terms of, you know, where that lands, in terms of which phrase you're capturing and taking for us as an organisation. I know it's a petition to us at the moment, but it certainly reads as if it could be one towards Development Victoria at the point in time. CEO, just your hand, sorry.
Yeah, look, I think we've all learned a lot of lessons through this process, but I do want to reassure everybody that it is the applicant that has put the application on pause. So the statutory timeframes under which we have to deal with it are paused. I think in terms of where Development Victoria sit right now, I think in the first instance, we are talking to them and making them fully aware of our expectations of them to do the community consultation properly, and they're committing to do that. And I think it's important, and it's a positive sign, that they've actually worked with the applicant to make sure that the Dan Murphy's permit application has been paused, and they've recognised with hindsight that they should have done community consultation on the changes to the master plan first and foremost, and they've now committed to do that. So I think, you know, perhaps councillors still need to see what happens, and it's going to be quite some time before this comes before council, and we will know the outcomes of that consultation process with the community and whether it's changed the position of the applicant or Development Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Mildred.
Sorry, just a couple of final little bits. I think it's now become critical for us as council to develop our position in respect to what our expectations are for the master plan that exists and or is being proposed. I think we need to deal with that, and we need to put a formal structure in place that we can deal with that and deal with it as a council, as the elected representatives, rather than just let this thing drift along for a period of time and then try and react to whatever comes back to us at some other time into the future, particularly in regard to the master plan and the structure planning, and to all the work that's been done by the council in more than 10 years with a lot of the actual strategic planning, and a lot of really hard, good work was done by a wide variety of different staff and different people that were brought in to deal with this project. We need to honour that work, and we need to understand it, and we need to make any variations that are absolutely essential to make, but to, you know, stick to where we need to be and make a decision as to what we want to see as the outcome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildred. And Councillor Hall, thanks for being patient.
Yeah, okay. I think we do, as Councillor Mildred's pointed out, need to have, some discussion around the master plan as a council. But I just wanted to give a little bit of, look, in nearly 5 years as a council, I cannot recall having a petition submitted to council with this amount of people signing to it. And mainly from Wodonga residents, there were 2,558 signatures received. I'd just like to note that I was unaware of the proposed development planning application to council, just like the public. I only found out about this planning application in the Border Mail. And I have been asked about this numerous times by the public, and they were quite alarmed that councillors were not informed or aware of such a planning application, especially one that would impact our CBD and people in the community. Yes, there were conversations at council about the lack of progress at Junction Place and the possibility of a new developer coming on board, but no discussions were had or mentioned about a new master plan proposal or the Dan Murphy planning application. And I find this lack of consideration towards elected community representatives disappointing. And that's why I'm making this a point, because I think we should probably have been given a bit more respect in that regards. And it questions again how council deals with these sorts of processes. I thank the community for their feedback and this petition. I know what hard work goes behind putting this together, and we're lucky to have a community who cares and is engaged enough to do this. Your views will certainly be taken on board by myself, and I'm sure all the councillors here tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall, and you do raise some very common and mutual grounds there. Thanks for sharing it the way you have. Councillor Watson, I think you're the only one that hasn't spoken. Did you have anything to add to this?
Look, I'm not going to repeat what's been said, but I have registered myself to go to one of the information sessions, so I'm more than happy to go along. I would like the community, if they do have, not social media is a great tool to get messages out and things like that, but it is also great touching base with actual individual councillors or via email or phone or whatever. So just keep that in mind. The community should keep that in mind as well, because you know, we as 7 individual councillors need to hear from each person or from people about their desires and feelings and things like that. Because I think we as a collective group would all think that, you know, we want the best for our CBA, and the best way to do that is through good community consultation and just talking. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson, and just picking up on that topic, if I can, councillors, obviously that's an important theme that's sort of carried across a few of our items in front of us this evening, is around that communication, which I know that each of you have heard enough of me talking about communication, but it is two-way, and we are fully accessible and available at any point in time through our council phones. If we don't get to them straight away or emails, we always respond to them, because I see the responses. So always encouraging the community to do that. And of course, formal questions to council, which I know a few fresh faces in my council term, although it'll be a short one so far, will pop up a little bit later this evening. So Councillor Bennett, any further to add in closing?
That was Olga, I think, who...
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Quilty, anything further in closing?
Thank you, Councillor Bennett and Mr. Mayor. No, I won't be repeating what has been said. I just support and take on board everything that has been said about the need for a formal structure for council to deal with this issue, and to once again thank the community for participation and encourage their further involvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. I therefore put the motion. Councillors, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Carried unanimously. Item 13 is the common seal of council, of which there's none. Councillors, general business. Happy for you to jump in if you have anything there. Just show a hand. If not, I knew the scarf was coming, Councillor Watson. I knew it was coming. Councillor Mildren, general business.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a sort of general business question more than anything else. It's come to my notice in the last couple of days that there's been a consultation process happening with the Department of Planning and the Ministry in association to changes to planning provisions. And it's been brought to my attention that some council staff and particularly CEOs are being asked to sign confidentiality agreements to not advise the councillors of what the changes are that are going on in the planning system. I'd just like to ask the CEO whether he's been approached to sign a document of that nature, or whether he knows of any of his staff that have been asked to do it, and whether he's had information in relation to the changes that are coming to the planning system.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. CEO?
So I can confirm that I've not been asked to sign any confidentiality agreement with regards to the proposed state planning reforms. I have, however, been involved in a briefing of all the CEOs by the MAV And we were told that that briefing was confidential, and all the CEOs quite strongly made a position back through MAB to government that there needs to be proper consultation with local government on these proposed reforms. It's not just the planning reforms, but we are seeing quite a lot of reforms, and we don't feel we're being properly consulted as local government. So emergency management reforms, planning reforms, housing reform, lots of others, but the planning reform one, I think it needs time, and it needs the state government to properly consult with the local government on those planning reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Any other general business? No, thank you. Item 15, urgent business, of which there's none. Item 16 is question time, CEO. We've got several questions this evening. Are you able to take us through those and the responses?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and please bear with me because you're right. We've got 7 questions and I'll read them with the response as quickly as I can. The first question is from Alison Mitchell. I applaud Council's work in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, including initiatives such as solar PV installation and the Renewable Power Agreement. However, in light of the recent ICPP report that makes the science clear that we need to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 to have any hope of achieving net zero emissions by 2050 and to avoid dangerous climate change's impacts, will City of Wodonga now consider setting emissions reductions targets beyond the compliance targets of the Victorian Climate Change Act 2017? And if not, why not? In response, obviously we thank Alison for her question. The Wodonga Council has proactively supported and committed itself to the Victorian Energy Collaboration, the VECO project, the largest ever emissions reduction project undertaken by a local government in Australia. This landmark initiative has enabled 46 Victorian councils to switch to 100% renewable energy, and this has effectively reduced the Wodonga Council's emissions by 80% with effect from the 1st of July 2021, well ahead of the IPCC report, which you quote, which states that we need to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030. Collectively, and across all 46 Victorian councils, this is equivalent to powering 48,000 homes with renewable energy or taking 90,000 cars off the road each year. At its meeting in March 2021, the Council adopted the Climate Change Policy 21 to 25, which sets out and confirms that Wodonga Council is committed to responding to the risks of climate change to council assets and services. Further, the objectives of this policy are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through appropriate mitigation strategies, apply risk management to develop adaptation strategies, conserve natural resources and promote a safe and healthy community. And finally, to evaluate the climate change implications when making strategic and operational decisions and developing policy positions. Despite already being on 100% renewable energy, the Council continues to consider the benefits of solar power and install energy efficient fittings and fixtures to its facilities and LED street lights on its main roads. Its passenger vehicle fleets also now include a number of hybrid vehicles. Council sustainability achievements over the past 4 or 5 years are documented in the minutes of the June and July Council meetings, and you're encouraged to visit these and see firsthand how well we have performed. We are currently revising the sustainability strategy and will soon commence with the new Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan, which we are anticipating will be out for public exhibition in early 2022. The extent to which Council changes its current emission reductions will be determined in its review of the sustainability strategy and that Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan. We trust this adequately responds to your inquiry and demonstrates this Council is clear in its commitment to emission reductions. The second question was from Kelly Dwyer. Will Council fly the Rainbow Pride flag from the Council chamber on the 17th of May next year, being International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia? Thanks to Kelly for the question. Council produces celebratory and occasional flags to promote and mark a number of key events and days throughout the year. Council welcomes the opportunity to work with you to produce and fly rainbow flags in support of International Day against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia Day on a pod of marketing flagpoles in the city. Whilst a number of the marketing flagpole pods in the CVA have already been booked for National Volunteers Week at the same time of year, there are still several pods available across the city, and we will work to raise flags in one of these pods. In regards to the flagpoles outside the council chamber, these are reserved for the Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags and governed by the Australian national flag protocols. Thanks for your query, Kelly, and I hope we've answered it satisfactorily. Third question is from Mike Fraser. Mike regularly keeps us on our toes with a series of financial questions. This one relates to the balance sheet. The balance sheet of the May finance report presented to the June meeting shows a change in the value of land held for sale from June 2020 of 10.2 million to May value of 5.4 million. Is this reduction the result of actual land sales or otherwise? Which parcels of land have been involved? In response to Mike, the amount in the balance sheet as at June the 30th, 2020 of 10.225 million represents the fair value of qualifying land assets as at that date, not the sale price. The transactions that have occurred during the year to reduce the balance to 5.446 million are as follows. Settlement on the former Wodonga Sale Yards land, settlement on land at Logic Boulevard, withdrawal from sale of Logic land at Tom Tanner's Road, and delayed settlement on land at Logic Boulevard. Remaining parcels of land include CBD West and Kiowa Valley Highway, both under contract of sale. The land held for resale will be restarted in the financial statements will be restated in the financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2021 to reflect a fair value equal to the final contract price. Fourth question is from Hannah Seymour. Virtual meetings prevent the community from attending face-to-face meetings. The local government minister issued a good practice guideline for virtual meetings relating to the COVID-19 Omnibus Act 2020. The guidelines state as follows: Requirement 3, representational at county council meetings by members of the public council, are encouraged to make councils are encouraged to make arrangements for members of the public who wish to appear before council to do so through virtual means or other alternatives, including allowing written questions and statements to be read out at the virtual council meeting or posted before the meeting, as we are doing now. Can council advise how members of the public can be heard in line with these guidelines? Hannah, thank you for your question on public participation at virtual council meetings. The holding of a virtual council meeting does not alter the opportunities for the public to have their voice heard by Wodonga Council. There are a number of ways this can occur. For instance, persons are free to contact individual councillors on a matter before the council to ensure that their views are known by the councillor or councillors prior to decisions being made. Persons may submit written questions to the council meeting as provided for under Rule 62 of Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. Petitions provide another opportunity for the voice of the community to be heard, as we've seen tonight, and can be lodged with the council in accordance with Rule 63 of Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. Rule 75, Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules allows persons to address the council with consent of the chair or by prior arrangement. As part of a formal legislative process, persons may be entitled to lodge submissions and or appear before the council, such as provided for under Section 223 of the Local Government Act or through the Planning and Environmental Act of 1987. Whilst COVID legislations permit all Victorian councils to conduct meetings by electronic means of communication up until the period ending 26th of April 2022, we hope that face-to-face meetings will resume soon. Nearly there. Question 5 from Avril York. Please can you consider the original plan for a cinema centre as per the original plan. We have nothing of interest in Wodonga apart from several hotels. Thank you. Our response to Averell: the council has heard and understands the community concerns around the future of Junction Place and is working hard to ensure this precinct continues to deliver on the expectations of the community. It is important to note that the site is owned by the state government agency, Development Victoria, which has entered into a development agreement with a private developer. The council's role is to continue to advocate on behalf of the community, and it is a responsible authority in the assessment of the planning permits that are submitted for the site. The cinema development remains a key part of the overall development. Development Victoria is hosting community sessions starting this week. This will be a key opportunity for our community to find out more and provide direct feedback. Sixth question from Bobby McKibben. How are councillors making themselves available and accessible in two-way engagement with the community, not only around the topic of Dan Murphy's, but also the revised master plan for Junction Place? Our response to Bobby: certainly the restrictions introduced due to the ongoing pandemic have made it more difficult to host opportunities in which the council can engage with the community, and we look forward, with the roadmap now released, to be able to host community forums and a public gallery at our council meetings in the near future. Councillor details are still available on the council website. They can be contacted to arrange a meeting, online or in person, as the restrictions allow. With any member of the community, never mind concerned members of the community, councils can be contacted by phone, by email, and in some instances via social media, and the community is encouraged to reach out and talk to our councillors at any time. Regarding the Junction Place development, there are planning permit applications that have been submitted. I think we've discussed that, to the council's planning team, which will come before council at some point. The council's role at this time is certainly to listen to their community, consider the merits of the proposal and the feedback prior to determining this matter. And lastly, a seventh question from John Mahoney. When did the CEO and members of the executive team first become aware of the developer's proposal, the Dan Murphy's development on Junction Place? And when were the councillors first briefed on the Dan Murphy's proposal on the Junction Place land? Response to John: Development Victoria first informed the CEO and Mayor of a potential new development partner in a face-to-face meeting in mid-February, following council's inquiry about the progress with the site, but at that stage, no detail was shared by DV. Also at this time, and over subsequent months, council planning staff provided technical planning support to Development Victoria and the developers of Junction Place, looking at multiple options for the revision of the master plan for the state-owned land parcels. Subsequently, once appropriate drafts were received, and the CEO became aware of the proposed packaged liquor outlet on the site, he updated the Mayor. The timing of this was a few weeks before the application was submitted and during a period where there were ongoing negotiations between technical planning staff and the applicant. These discussions about the site were acknowledged during a councillor briefing on July the 12th, when in the course of speaking about Station 73, which is Junction Place, and the residential development within the precinct, the CEO noted the potential for a new commercial development in the precinct, but without identifying the nature of the business. The application was formally notified in the last week of July 2021, and councillors were verbally briefed on this application at the next briefing session of council on Monday, August the 2nd. Mr. Mayor, that's the 7 questions. And I'm going to grab a drink of water. Thank you.
Go for it. Thank you. Councillors, on to item 17, which is confidential business, of which we have some to conduct. Recommendation on page 387 to close the meeting to public. Councillors, thank you. Councillor Bennett, seconder, please. Councillor Watson, does anyone wish to speak against? Thank you. We'll now close, carried, and we'll close the meeting to public. Thank you. Helps if I take myself off mute, doesn't it? Just checking all councillors are here. Good to go. Thank you, councillors. Recommend item 19, adopt the in-camera recommendations. Recommendation on page 410 of your agenda. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. To move, second, Councillor Hall. Does anyone wish to speak against? Carried unanimously. Councillors, thank you very much. Meeting closed at 9:17 p.m. Thank you very much.